According to a new survey by Fannie Mae, 86% of Americans say that now is not a good time to buy a home. And that makes sense. There's recession indicators flashing red all over the economy. The median sales price is at an all time high, or at least near an all time high. And mortgage rates are higher than they were pre pandemic, making purchasing a home more expensive for many Americans. But that statement that now is not a good time to buy a home seems to imply that sometime in the future, maybe in 2025 or in 2026, then it will be a good time to buy a home. That home prices will have come down or mortgage rates will have come down, and you as the home buyer will be able to flood into the housing market and purchase something that's a little bit more affordable. And while that could be true, nobody knows what'll happen in the future. I think you need to be cautious when you're thinking about that and hoping for home prices to crash or mortgage rates to come down to present a better buying opportunity for you in the housing market. At the end of the day, what we have right now, despite these higher prices, despite relatively high mortgage rates, there are still more buyers than there are sellers right now in the overall housing market, right? There's a housing shortage, and there has been since before 2021 and this pandemic boom. I have this article right here, this Realtor um, magazine that says not enough homes. And you would think that this is recent. You would think that this is only a few months old, but it's actually dated from August 2019. So before the housing boom, before prices got bid up, there weren't enough homes in the economy. And if we look at the housing market from this perspective, and we see what's going on right now in the housing market with rates starting to come down, with not many buyers jumping into the housing market because so many people aren't optimistic about what's going on. Right now could be the Goldilocks opportunity for you to jump in, purchase a property, get a good deal at a rate that's reasonable before rates come down and more people jump back into the housing market. Or if prices end up coming down, then again, more people are going to be in the market, things are going to be more expensive, and it's going to be harder for you as a home buyer out there. So, anyway, my name is Liam O'Reilly. I'm a realtor here in Vermont with Jerry Riley Real Estate. If you have any real estate related needs, feel free to reach out to me directly, and let's get into some of these articles here. So, the first one right here, National Housing Survey, only 14% of consumers believe it's a good time to buy a home, a new survey low. So, an all-time low for home buying sentiment. Not many people think right now is a good time to buy a home. And again, it makes sense when you see what's going on in the overall economy. Now, this chart, this is a Gallup survey, so a different survey than what Fannie Mae does, but it gives you a good representation of how people are feeling about the overall housing market. So, back in 2007, right as things were starting to crack in the housing market nationally, the housing survey was at 58%. 58% of people still said it was a good time to buy in 2007. By 2008, when things were collapsing, 53% of people said it was a good time to buy a home. And then by 2009, it was up at 71%. Now, their survey is a little bit older. This is from May of 2023. Only 21% of Americans at that time said that now was a good time to buy a home. And according to, Fannie Mae, if their survey reflects the Gallup survey, if the Gallup survey reflects this Fannie Mae survey, then it's dropped even lower since then. And again, it makes sense when we take a look at the indicators in the economy. This is the home price to income ratio, which is at an all-time high. So it's more expensive to buy a home relative to household income than it ever has been. The median sales price is right around its all-time high across the country. And when we take a look at the recession indicators, I was just reading this article out of Forbes, and it says here, meanwhile, the New York Fed's probability of a recession within the next 12 months is down from its recent peak, but remains elevated at 52%. Historically, there has always been a recession when it reaches this high level. And then they show this chart of the New York Fed's prediction of a recession and then when a recession starts. And to put this into perspective, back in 2008, right in the middle here, it was at the New York Fed's prediction of a recession was at around 40%. Back in the 1980s, before that recession, it was at around 90%, almost 100% chance of a recession. And now we're at 52%, and it's never been at 52%, and we haven't had a recession. But what does that mean for home prices? Obviously, during 2008, throughout most of the country, home prices came down at least a little bit. Even here in Vermont, home prices dropped by around 5% year over year. Obviously, not a huge crash in home prices, but they did come down a little bit. But if we have a recession, will we see the median sales price drop? Well, let's take a look back into some of the other recessions that have taken place in the past. This is a chart of median sales price of houses sold in the United States dating back to around 1960. Looks like 1963. Those gray lines streaking down the chart, those are when the US economy entered into a recession. So obviously we have here in 2007 to about 2010, we saw home prices decline nationally through the great financial crisis. But when we take a look back at what happened in other recessions, we'll see that home prices generally remain relatively flat and stable throughout recessions. If not, they trend slightly upwards. And it's tough to see on this chart because we have so things are so much more expensive today than they were back in the 80s or the 90s. But let's zoom in a little bit and see what happened in 1990 to overall home prices, just to get a good sense of what happened. So we see here home prices dipped quarter over quarter from Q2 to Q3 and then spiked back up a little bit and then remained relatively flat exiting the recession. So a little volatile in home prices quarter over quarter, but nothing that's too out of the ordinary, that's too unexpected. Now, when we take a look at 1980, we can see pretty much the same thing. Right in the 1980 recession, home prices gradually increased. And then as we moved into 1981 and 1982, we see that volatile quarter, so a slight dip, which could just be, variance in home sales. And then things remain flat and slightly increased heading out of the recession. What about back in the 70s? So 1970s, we saw home prices decline slightly, but again, not a huge drop off. Entering the recession, we have the median sales price in 1969 at almost 26,000, and it fell to a bottom of 22,600. So we're looking at about a 10-20%. I guess that's about a 20% decline in home prices. So that is pretty significant, even though in nominal terms, it's not, it doesn't seem like much when we're talking about 26,000 down to 22,000. But then when we look through the second half of the 1970s, we see from 1974 to 1975, home prices steadily increased throughout that recession. So all this being said, yes, of course, home prices collapsed in 2008 nationally, but it doesn't necessarily mean that just because we have a recession in 2024, like these indicators are suggesting, that we'll see home prices come down on a national level. And when you think about where we are in terms of inventory on the market, or in terms of new homes that have been built, so we take a look here. This is the new privately owned housing starts total units. So this is single family homes, how much construction has been going on over the past few years. We can see that even though construction peaked or has shot up since its September lows, we still haven't reached this pre-Great Recession building boom that we really need throughout the country. We entered this lull after the great financial crisis, and we never really recovered, and we still haven't recovered. Now, with these higher interest rates, albeit interest rates are coming down, so maybe we'll see an increase in building and new construction as we move through 2024. But as of right now, we're not building nationally the amount of homes that we need to for the amount of buyers that are out there who would love to purchase these homes, these properties. And when you talk about how it's more expensive to purchase a home than it is to rent a home right now, while that is true, it's more expensive to rent a home right now than it was to purchase a home back in 2020 or 2021. So when we look at home buyer payments back in those years, we scroll down on Redfin here. So home buyer payments right now, this is the median payment for the median priced home at current interest rates at 6.67% nationally. Now, you might be able to get a rate slightly better than this. It might be slightly worse. But for the median sales price home, putting 20% down, your average monthly payment will be $2,400 roughly. Back in 2021, your average monthly payment was around $1,700. So much cheaper than it was today. Now, many of the people who bought in 2020, 2021, even at the beginning of 2022, have locked into these lower rates, to these sub 4%, these sub 5% rates, and they can't afford to sell that home and rent somewhere right now. So if we enter into a time of economic hardship, there's going to be a lot of people fighting to stay in their homes, which is going to continue to keep inventory low and make it difficult for home buyers out there. I think, during 2008, there were a lot of forced sellers as the subprime bubble collapsed and people were forced to sell their homes. It's really a different story today as we move into 2024, and people are going to fight to keep their low mortgage rate, fight to stay in their home. And so, I mean, if we think about what we would need to see if in order for home prices to come down, in order for this forced selling, if people can't afford to stay in a home with a low mortgage rate, with a sub 5% mortgage rate, then they won't be able to rent at these elevated rent prices either, which it would really just be a disaster throughout the economy. And I mean, if you think that's what's going to happen, then that's your prediction. You have to make decisions based on what you think is going to happen. But personally, I think it's pretty unlikely that we're going to see mass homelessness or something like that throughout the United States. So anyway, Liam O'Reilly from Economic Realtor. Let me know what you guys think. I always love reading your comments and hearing your perspective on these topics. I learned so much from you folks. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.